Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 16th of February and we are going to deal with two very important topics which are in news. One of these topics is the series which we are running, that Indian economy a review, and the other topic is Supreme Court terms electoral bonds as unconstitutional. There had been a litigation in the Supreme Court filed by ADR, CPI, Marxist, and others, claiming that the donations received by the political parties via electoral bond scheme introduced in 2018 is unconstitutional. Why? Because it is violating the right to information of the citizens. Because donations received by the political parties through electoral bonds were not available to the public, means who is donating which political party and what amount, we did not have any access to that. Right to information is an inferred right under Article 19, that is freedom of speech and expression. And now finally, the Supreme Court has turned this scheme down and has termed it unconstitutional because it has been violating the right to freedom of speech and expression, meaning right to information of the citizens is being violated. Next is the Indian economy, a review. What made the Indian economy resilient? This is what we are doing the series. This is a precursor to the economic survey which has been released. And here we come to the second chapter. There are more or so two chapters only in this particular, I would say, booklet issued by the government. Now we've come to the second chapter. This is a big chapter. So the starting is that what made the Indian economy resilient. Resilient is basically that shape which any, I would say, commodity or any entity regains even after multiple stretchings or whatever shocks it experiences. It regains its original shape. So similarly, when we are talking about the word resilience and prefixing it with economy, means economy underwent multiple shocks due to COVID or after that the Russia-Ukraine war. But still, it has regained its shape. It is still growing. These kind of shocks have not impacted the economic growth as such in India. Now, the factors we will study, what factors have made the Indian economy resilient. Very important topic. Just the beginning of the second chapter. Tomorrow video and day after tomorrow's video, I will be covering the entire booklet. Now, let us start with the first topic, that is Supreme Court terms the electoral bonds as unconstitutional. Supreme Court has struck down the electoral bond scheme which was introduced in the year 2018, citing this scheme as unconstitutional. Now, there were two main issues in front of the Supreme Court which it had to adjudicate upon with respect to this particular scheme. First was anonymity of the donors, means people who were donating to the political parties via these electoral bonds, their identity was not disclosed. So, the legalization of anonymous donations to political parties, how much this is legal? On one side, the political parties who brought this particular scheme, they said that it is good that nobody is getting to know who has donated, because if the political parties to which the donations are coming, if they get to know that who has donated, they will be favoring that person. So it is good that no one knows. Whereas on the other hand, the litigants who had filed against this electoral bond scheme, they claimed that it is the right of information, right to information of the citizens. They should know about the funding of the political parties. Political parties are very important entities in the democratic setup of the country. So the people should know where the funding to the political parties are coming, because it is those political parties they have to vote for in the elections. So that is why they should be knowing. So these were the two major questions in front of the Supreme Court which it had been evaluating. October 31st was basically the date when the Supreme Court started hearing on these two questions, large questions, and the two issues concerned violations of Article 19, 14 and 21. how these articles were being violated, we will see. 19 is freedom of speech and expression. The right to information is basically an inferred right under Article 19. Article 14 is right to equality. We will see how this is being violated, and Article 21 is basically right to life. So, on these grounds, since it is violating multiple fundamental rights, the Supreme Court has termed it as unconstitutional. Now, before getting into the judgment of the Supreme Court, let us first understand what are electoral bonds. Because without that understanding, we'll not be able to get to the understanding of the judgment. So, bonds per se are those instruments which are issued by any entity. The party who is purchasing those bonds will give money for purchasing those bonds, and in those bonds it will be written that, I am taking this much money from you, I will return you back this much money with this much interest by this much time. Generally, this is what is written on the bond. It is a kind of a financial instrument. Just like shares are there, bonds are also there. But here, in case of electoral bonds, money will not be returned. Forget about the interest. It is just donation one way. The ones who are buying those bonds are donating their money with the intent of not taking it back. That is what electoral bond is. Now, the purpose for introducing electoral bonds was to bring more transparency in electoral funding, because earlier electoral fundings and all were largely done on cash basis. So now electoral bonds are coming, so we are getting to know that how much money is going into the bank accounts of the political parties. Although we were not getting to know that who has been donating. That was the main issue. But we got to know that this much amount is going into the bank accounts. That became transparent. And one more thing which you need to know, that this was not the only channel of raising funds by the political parties. The conventional channel, that is getting funds through cash, was also open along with this. So that was the main intent of bringing in this electoral bond scheme in 2018. And another intent was black money will be curbed, because a lot of black money is being used to fund electoral politics and all. So this will happen. This was the main, I would say, agenda, or this was the main objective of introducing those electoral bonds. So what is an electoral bond? We should understand first. An electoral bond is like a financial tool used for making donations to political parties. It is like a financial tool and not a financial tool. If it would have been a financial tool, then the money which is being used to purchase those bonds would be returned back with interest. But here it is donation, only one way. It will not be returned back. Forget about the interest. The general public can also subscribe these bonds to fund eligible political parties. The bonds play a similar role as banknotes that are payable to the bearer free of interest and demand. And an individual party can purchase these bonds digitally or with the help of a DD or a check. Now, this scheme was launched by the Union government in 2018, as I have already mentioned this to you. Now, how does it work? First of all, we need to understand that, from where do we get these bonds from? We can only get these bonds from SBI. Authorized branches of SBI will be giving us these bonds. Second of all, we need to know this, that, when are they issued? Are they available all the year round? No, they are issued in the first 10 days of every quarter starting. So let's suppose a quarter is starting April. So for 1 April till 10th April. During these 10 days, it will be available. April, May, June. Then the second quarter starting July. So July first 10 days it will be available. July, August, September. Go. October, 1 to 10 October it will be available in those SBI branches. Like this it happens. Who can purchase it? A citizen of India or a body incorporated in India is eligible to purchase the bond. EBs are issued or purchased for any value in multiples of thousands, 10,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh and 1 crore from the specified branches of the State Bank of India. Only specified branches of State Bank of India is there, and SBI is the only bank authorized to sell these bonds. EBs have a life of 15 days, during which it can be used for making donation only to the political parties registered under Section 29A of the Representation of Peoples Act 1951. Now let's understand this point. Let's suppose I went to that specified branch of SBI. I bought an electoral bond. I paid 1 lakh rupees. Now SBI will notify that political party that to whomever I have donated that I have received donations for you worth 1 lakh rupees. Notify me whether I have to transfer it to your bank account or not. So when the political party notifies, then only SBI branch transfers that money into that political party's bank account. If within 15 days that political party fails to notify the SBI branch that okay, transfer the money in my bank account, then that money will not be transferred to that political party's bank account. That will go to the Prime Minister Relief Fund. Okay, so this is what it says. Okay, the amount is redeemable in bank account of party within 15 days from the issuance of bonds. SBI deposits the bond amount to PM Relief Fund if any political party has not encashed it within 15 days. This is what 15 days period means. Now, are all the political parties eligible to raise money via this electoral bonds? No. Only those political parties which are registered under Section 29A of the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 will be allowed to do so. So, I can form any political party, I cannot register it, and I can raise money, donations through those electoral bonds. It cannot be. I have to first register under Section 29A of the RPA Act, and then only I will be able to receive funds or receive donations via these bonds. The party must have secured not less than 1% of the votes polled in the last general elections to the Lok Sabha or a state legislative assembly. Then, even after registration, there is a second, I would say, tier eligibility criteria. This is there. So, if a statement comes that all the political parties registered with the Election Commission of India or registered under Section 29A of the RPA are eligible for receiving donations via the electoral bond scheme, that statement is wrong. They may be registered, but they may not qualify this criteria. This criteria is the party must have secured not less than 1% votes of the votes polled in the last general elections to the Lok Sabha or state legislative assembly. So it is like this case. So you have to be very much vigilant. Then the bonds shall be available for purchase for this period of 10 days each in the months of January, April, July and October. These are basically those months where a new quarter is starting. Okay. The bond can be encashed by an eligible political party only through a designated bank account with the authorized bank. And political parties have to disclose the amount to the Election Commission, the total amount being received, not who has donated. This was there. That Election Commission of India has to know that what amount is coming to the political parties via this electoral bond scheme. But which person or which business house has donated how much amount, that Election Commission of India did not get to know. Another question came ki sir, wasn't it reflected in the, I would say, transactions of that political party bank account? Actually, in the bank accounts of those political parties, it is not reflected that who has donated this. It is only reflected that you have received or this much amount is credited to the bank account via electoral bond scheme, EBS. It is like this. You get the bond paper when you donate. You can individually go to that political party and show them that bond paper that I have donated this much. See, I have this bond paper. This bond paper is in my name. So this way the parties will come to know ki bhai, who has donated. But yes, that trail, money trail which is created, from that the political parties will not get to know. How does it look like? It looks like this electoral bond. So I can take this electoral bond, value is mentioned, who has paid, it is mentioned over here. So I can show it to the political parties and say, bhai, I have donated, see. So then the political parties will come to know, bhai, I have donated. But the political parties also will not get to know, bhai, this money which has been credited to our account from the electoral bond scheme, which person has donated it. That was the clause of anonymity. Now, why were the EBs introduced? We need to understand this. EBs were introduced to ensure that all the donations made to a party would be accounted for in the balance sheets without exposing the donor details to the public. Means to bring in more transparency. The central government said that electoral bonds would keep a tab on the use of black money for funding elections. This will be reduced because majority of the black money, or many or much amount of the black money, is parked over here. In the absence of electoral bonds, donors would have no option but to donate by cash after siphoning off money from their businesses, the government said. Now they have this route of donating by electoral bonds. Now we come to the Supreme Court's decision. What decision the Supreme Court has taken? So there are four broad points which we need to understand in the judgment of the Supreme Court. The first is, it said that electoral bond scheme violates voters' right to information. Voters' right to information is basically an inferred right under Article 19 of the Constitution. Now the court unanimously held this, that voters have a right to information about political parties and their sources of funding. It highlighted the deep association between money and politics, which is there. And it also said one more thing, that economic inequality contributes to political inequality. Means those who are having the money, those who are having deep pockets, and they are donating to political parties, they will be having an edge over those people who are not able to contribute. And the government may make policies or laws favoring them, those who are donating, and not to those who are not donating. So, economic inequality can lead to political inequality. It is just for the namesake that anonymity will be there, the political parties will not get to know. Aisa nahi hai. If I do a donation of 10 crore rupees to the political party, I'll definitely take that electoral bond to that political party's members and tell them that, bhai, I have done this donation. Obviously, they need the money. They will be more inclined towards me. They will not get to know about this donation, who has donated via the common route. But physically, if I take that electoral bond, so they'll get to know. It is like this. So, government may be making policies which are in my favor and not in the favor of the poor people. So, that will lead to economic inequality, will lead to political inequality. And here, Article 14 is being violated as well. Now, restrictions are disproportionate to curbing circulation of black money. Now, we've put these kind of restrictions, like anonymity will be there, no name will be disclosed. The Supreme Court is saying that the logic given was that black money will be curbed, people will be, donating, and their names will not be disclosed, so black money circulation will be curbed in the economy. By understanding this common logic, we can understand that black money circulation will be curbed. But it is not happening. And this particular reason that black money distribution will be reduced is disproportionate. Disproportionate to the harms this particular scheme is causing, like it is violating right to information or right to equality. So we cannot keep this curbing of black money at the top or above these things, above these logics. It is like this. So this is something which needs to be understood. Then, right to donor privacy was not absolute. This is what the Supreme Court held. It said that right to privacy of political affiliations only extends to contributions that are made as genuine forms of public support, not contributions that are made to influence the policies of the political party. If your intention is to influence the policy making of the political party when it comes to power, and that is why you are donating, then claiming that I have my right to privacy is not justified. If you are donating by for genuine support, then that may be justified. But here we cannot, classify that what is the intention. So since we cannot classify, the Supreme Court said that the court saw fit to strike down the entire scheme. So it is like this. And last is unlimited political contributions by companies is unconstitutional. In 2017 finance bill, there was an amendment done. That amendment was that in the Companies Act, that amendment was done. Earlier, companies could donate 7.5% of their net profit of the previous 3 years. Average profit of previous 3 years, 7.5% could be donated to political parties. This was the cap set. But with that amendment bill of 2017, just a year prior to electoral bond scheme was introduced, that limit was removed, 7.5%. You can donate any much. That cap was removed. That is why it is written that unlimited political contributions by companies is unconstitutional. Like companies, they have one motive, that is profit. And if they are donating money somewhere, they will be seeking profit. And somewhere is that political entity which is powerful. That is not an NGO. That is not something which is you are donating for a noble cause. This is what the judges interpreted. Now it stated that contributions from companies were purely business transactions made with the intent of securing benefits in return. The court also highlighted the fact that companies have a greater ability to influence politics through contributions, stating permitting unlimited corporate contributions. This unlimited happened in 2017. It authorizes the restrained influence of companies in the electoral process. So, these 4 were the reasons given by the Supreme Court to term the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional. We need to understand these 4 points pretty well. Before that, we need to understand the electoral bond scheme pretty well. Then only we'll be able to fit in the topic. Now next is Indian economy, a review. This publishing by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, we are covering. It is basically a precursor to the economic survey. This is our 3rd day into it. We are running a series. Now we have come to the 2nd chapter, that is what made the Indian economy resilient. Now many of the aspirants, they keep on asking me the meaning of the word resilient. So this definition of resilience was given in this book. So I decided to start with this first. Now the word resilience is defined in the Cambridge Dictionary as the ability of a substance to return to its usual shape after being bent, stretched or pressed. The ability to return to its original shape after meeting these shocks. So when I say that resilient economy going through various shocks, but still it's regaining or coming back to its original shape. Means these shocks are not impacting the economy as such. Now in the recent years, if there is one major economy in the world that has displayed that quality beyond any reasonable doubt, it is. There have been factors which are responsible for these resilience. Now, it is not like the factors which came or which we adopted during those shocks were being experienced. Those definitely do matter. Like shocks, I'm talking about COVID pandemic and then the Russia-Ukraine war. During and after these things or these shocks were there, multiple measures were taken by the government to respond to these shocks. What I mean to say is that not only because of those measures being taken at that time, the Indian economy was resilient. Actually, some measures were taken prior to these shocks as well. From 2014 onwards, from the last 6 years, the government had been taking multiple measures, which definitely helped us during those shock times or during those difficult times, which made our economy resilient. So we need to understand these things, that steps taken on after the onset of the pandemic or after the onset of those shocks. So these are those steps which we have taken during or after that shock. These are definitely responsible for making our economy resilient. But next slide, steps taken before the pandemic, these were also very much important in making our economy resilient. So we need to understand both of these. The first is smart COVID management through localized lockdowns. The spread of COVID, no doubt, was intense. I still remember that I used to keep a tab on World O Meters. There was this website which highlighted that, these many cases coming, these many cases coming today, or the TV news channels, they kept on highlighting this. These many deaths, these many recoveries, these many people getting contracted COVID. All these kept on happening. And the government was pressurized to move the country into lockdowns, because the government knew that if they opened the country, if they removed the lockdowns, then it will spread like rapidly. Then the damage will be irreparable. On the other hand, the hospital infrastructure was also not so capable of, uh, treating so many people. We all saw that during the second wave when, there were dearths of oxygen cylinders. So that was a very smart move of localized lockdowns by the government, which were implemented stringently. Then rapid nationwide vaccination. This was the game changer for India. First of all, development of vaccination in record time. Then administration of these vaccination, how this vaccine is going to be implemented. A vaccine program is going to be implemented, how the people are going to get these vaccines. And all in these places, the digital public infrastructure played a very crucial role. We had to book our vaccination slots, go there, get vaccinated. Vaccination certificate was also available within no time. Actually, that was worth commendable. The cherry on the cake here was that our vaccination was very effective. Our vaccine was very effective. Why I am saying this? Because when the third wave came, that is Omicron, there were no such lockdowns which were imposed in the country. Whereas if you see the third wave in USA or China, their lockdowns were there. So, due to vaccinations which were effectively delivered and were effective also, we did not go into lockdowns, which kept our economic growth up and made our economy resilient. Measured and targeted fiscal policy was provided for the poor and low income households, Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, while monetary policy ensured adequate liquidity as a lifeline for MSMEs. MSMEs, those had ample this credit availability and all, so that they can keep on their functioning going. It was like this. Then a large expansion of the government's capex budget. Capex is capital expenditure. Government kept on building roads, flyovers, ports. These construction work were there. So what it did, it generated jobs momentarily for the people at that time. And when the lockdowns were over, these projects were on the finishing stages, or they have finished now. They started paying back to the government. And most importantly, they have spurred economic activity in those regions, in those respective regions where they have been constructed or built. This was the strategy of the government, and it actually is working right now. Then proactive inflation management by the government and RBI. Although 2022, I still remember the Monetary Policy Committee submitted a report for the very first time that it is not able to contain inflation well within the limits, that is 2 to 6%. The average inflation was around 7% for 3 successive quarters. And it was the first time in the history of Monetary Policy Committee since 2016 that it is submitting this kind of report, where it is not able to manage or tackle inflation within limits. But yes, if I compare India's inflationary statistics with the inflationary statistics of the entire world, developed, developing, underdeveloped countries, we are, you know, well placed over there as well. Inflation in some countries were in double digits, including USA. So, this is what actually happened. Steps taken before the pandemic means 2014 till 2020. These steps taken actually also helped in keeping our economy resilient. We need to credit them as well. A strong balance sheet of the public sector enterprises, public sector banks particularly. Their NPAs were well within control, and there was this insolvency and bankruptcy code which was not letting any bad debts happen. Insolvency Board of India was conducted insolvency, and this act was also there which we studied yesterday. Then fiscal discipline in the last 10 years has enabled to large extent the scaling up of capital expenditure by union government. Fiscal discipline means we have kept the fiscal deficit within limits. We have limited our spending, increased our income, our means the government's income. How the tax collections, they have been streamlined. Digitalization definitely has played a role over here also. So the government definitely had money to do the capex, capital expenditure, because last 10 years we were fiscally disciplined. The simultaneous pursuit of energy security and energy transition. We studied it yesterday. Energy security, we need more and more energy output, energy generation, and we also need to conserve the environment. So for that we are transitioning to the cleaner sources, and it is not easy to transition, it is not easy to have that much of energy with transition, but yes, we were successful, we are successful in maintaining this balance. It is not like if for securing our energy security we should not go for energy transition. We are going for energy transition and simultaneously targeting energy security. So this is something which we have achieved in the past. Now this year also the government has launched that Pradhan Mantri Yojana, where solar panels will be installed on the houses, rooftop solar panels. 1 crore households is the target. So that is basically again this meeting the energy demand while doing this energy transition. Next is domestic demand. That has been, I would say, the staple factor. Domestic demand is due to the population. That has always saved us, saved our country. Domestic demand has enabled generation of products. Generation of products will be there. So you will see the GDP rising. When population is too high of the country, and that population's per capita income is also increasing, thereby demand is rising. Another factor responsible over here is that the grassroots level demand which is rising. Why? Because people at the grassroots level, means poorest of the poor, are having money in their hands now. Their earnings no doubt have increased, MG Narega and all, but the subsidy transfers to them are also happening, and 100% of the subsidies are being transferred in their bank accounts now. Earlier there were a lot of leakages, corruption, due to which those people at the lowest levels of that economic hierarchy were not able to have that subsidies with them. So their spending capacity reduced. Spending capacity reduced means demand reduce. So this is now sustained domestic demand. We are better placed that demand will not subside, demand will not go down, because people are having money in their hands. And last but not the least is digitalization in service delivery by the government. This has been basically the hallmark of India's, I would say, steps taken. In every domain, you will see digitalization happening, and that has enabled economic growth. So we need to understand things in these manner, and we need to connect the things. And with this, we come to an end of today's session. I will be meeting you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.